I think the first sentence, it's more a process of elimination because um, if we're talking about what would be the best noun to go there, um, like what are the kinds of things that philosophers talk about? They talk about problems, and a certain area of problems is a very awkward way of saying it, but it feels like that works better than form or situations, which are not as philosophically, like a problem is a philosophical thing. It's to do with, um, reasoning more than the others are. So it's probably just on that basis. I wouldn't have been able to pick it if there weren't options there. A certain area of investigation, a certain area of thinking. I'm not sure. Um, Unclear by itself, but problems work slightly better than the others. Mm. Um, we in the later sentence, this is only partly due to the fact that the English word mind has no exact equivalent. This idea of equivalence and exact equivalence is, I guess, an important um, uh, reasoning phrase of reasoning. It's about comparing things and deciding whether they are equal to each other or have the same value as each other. So to say that something has an exact equivalent is to say that there is another thing that has exactly the same value. So if they're talking about different languages, they're asking whether there's a concept in each language that's exactly the same, even if there's a different word to represent it. And that phrase, exact equivalent or no exact equivalent, um, is common for thinking about these kinds of comparisons. Mm.
Can you also explain for the last sentence?
It is also a reflection of the fact that the classification in which this label figures. So they're talking about a classification. There's a label
Yep.
within a form of classification. That classification is itself based on certain profound philosophical assumptions, often unexpressed. So I think they're saying that it's not just that there is no equivalent word for mind in other languages. There are different words like consciousness, conscience, that sort of thing. Um, but also that it's the word in philosophy doesn't sit by itself. It's part of a classification system in which this label figures. So figures here is a verb. The label figures in a classification system. That is, the label is part of or works within that classification system. It figures in it. It's a very loose sort of. Okay, so the classification in which this label figures. So the verb is sitting inside a phrase that modifies classification. Yeah. So you could take out in which this label figures. You could say grammatically, the classification is itself based on certain profound philosophical assumptions. So it's the in which this label figures um, is part of the noun group for classification. It usually means deep, and deep might mean at a more fundamental level or a lower level of thinking. That is, it starts, they're starting from more basic or fundamental assumptions, or it could mean more meaningful in some way. So that metaphor of depth is there, profound.